councilforthenationalinterest.org. Aren't you sick of the neocons and the Israel lobby pretending as though they've earned some kind of monopoly on foreign policy wisdom in Washington, D.C.? These peanut clowns who've never been right about anything? Well, the Council for the National Interest is pushing back, putting America first, and telling the lobby to go take a hike. The empire's bad enough without the neocons making it all about the interests of a foreign state. Help CNI promote peace. Visit their site at councilforthenationalinterest.org and click Donate under About Us at the top of the page. That's councilforthenationalinterest.org.
Hey everybody, how's it going? What a complete and total disaster. What a crappy way to start a week of radio shows. You would think after a decade and a half at this, I would have figured out a thing or two about how to do it. But no, I haven't figured out a damn thing. In fact, I'm amazed still at how many things I can get wrong at the same time when it comes to running this show. I mean, my facts are all good. You know, when I accuse politicians of this, that, or the other thing. But, Jesus, can I not hit a button? If only I had a DeLorean, I could just go back to 11 o'clock and just start this whole thing over again. Got no DeLorean. Got a 17-year-old, 18-year-old little pickup truck. I don't even think it could get to 88 miles an hour with or without a flux capacitor. I always thought it was a flex capacitor when I was a kid. Now I know it's flux capacitor, whatever the hell that is, but I like saying flex capacitor better. So it made me think of like time and space flexing or something. I don't know. I was 9 when that movie came out, alright? Cut me some slack. I am Scott Horton, the worst radio host ever. And this is my horrible show that you would be right to hate and not listen to. It's the Scott Horton Show. ScottHorton.org is where I hang out. From time to time, anyway. I'm now in the chat room if you want to join up the chat room. I wonder if I'm even on No Agenda. They probably hit the cancel button on my ass over there, right? Oy. I think I'm going to start this all over again. Everybody, how the hell are you? Let's pretend it was 7 minutes ago. Welcome to the start of the show, where everything is going right. Oi, Gewalt! As some people I care about might say. Or, ay caramba, as some of those very same people might say. I used to get those mixed up when I was a kid. Ay, Gewalt. And, oi, caramba. I remember saying, oi, caramba. And my teacher looking at me going, what? Well, you know, I come from mixed ethnicity, okay? So does pretty much everybody. Anyway. Oi, caramba. I'm Scott Horton, and this is my show. I'm all mixed up, but I'm doing a show. It's Monday morning. This coffee... Did somebody switch my coffee out for decaf or something? I don't know what's going wrong. I got Phil Weiss coming up on the show, and I'm just going to ask him to say smart things, and hopefully he'll say smart things for a while. And that'll be like, value added right there for sure. Good old Phil Weiss, you know? And then Adam Morrow's going to be on the phone from Cairo to tell us about what the hell's going on over there. I think it might be the biggest peaceful demonstrations in the history of mankind. Breaking out in protest of the Arab Spring. Pining for a military dictatorship against the democratically elected, yet ineffectual or worse Muslim Brotherhood. Well, we've been talking with Adam Morrow from Interpress Service since the Arab Spring broke out. And he's been real sharp so far. Probably don't interview him often enough. But anyway, so we'll see what's going on there. You remember now, and I don't know how much stock to put in this or how much weight, assuming this is 100% truth, how much weight that it really has in as far as what's going on the ground there. But remember, Phil Giraldi reported that he had CIA buds telling him that the Saudis were financing the opposition to the Muslim Brotherhood. They don't like the Muslim Brotherhood because the Qataris like the Muslim Brotherhood. The Saudis hate it. So Phil was saying that the CIA was saying, apparently. He didn't say CIA, I guess. Or did he? I don't know. Anyway, his sources, who we can assume are CIA sources, I guess, were telling him that the Saudis are bankrolling rent-a-mobs. Now, obviously, you couldn't chalk up all the giant protests in Egypt right now to Saudi-backed rent-a-mobs, but then again, the violent parts, perhaps. But anyway, I don't know. Who knows? I'm going to talk with Adam Morrow, see what he says about all this. But, what I saw this morning was on Well, it was on CNN International, so I don't know how much credit to give or credibility to give it or anything, but they said that the military had announced that Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood president, has, I forgot how many hours now, 48 hours. Or apparently, I don't know if they didn't outright say, I don't think they're going to overthrow him, but they're at least going to push him aside, if not completely out. So this very well could be the end of regular elections, such as they have been over there. I don't know. I wish I had better sources. I wish I knew who to read about what's really going on in the State Department about Egypt, like kind of fly on the wall stuff. Daniel McAdams has a thing at LouRockwell.com today where I think he overestimates the Americans' bet on the liberals before the Arab Spring, that they really wanted that to happen. Or I think, to the degree that they wanted so-called democracy in Egypt, it was to stave off revolution, not to promote it. They didn't want the April 5th people, whatever, to just outright overthrow Mubarak and Suleiman, I don't think. Although, I think they had come to terms with the fact that Mubarak's son was going to not be acceptable, and that they had to come up with something else for the post-Mubarak era. But when the revolution broke out in 2011, that was no CIA rent-a-mob like, Iran 53 or something like that. That was millions and millions and millions of people taking the opportunity to get rid of America's back dictator. Now, so maybe that was America's plan B too, or plan C or something. Although, sure seemed like they were trying to save Mubarak as much as they could. Hillary Clinton especially. She's not that good of an actor. She's actually pretty pathetic. And she's on TV literally sweating bullets going, man, we want... protesters, please restrain yourselves. And Hosni Mubarak, he's not that bad. He's a family friend of mine. He's a moderate reformer. Anyway. So, that's a long introduction for Adam Morrow coming on the show, too. And I got a bunch of news to cover. What a disaster the start of the show today. Jesus. Save me, Jesus, from the crappiness of my show, because it's pretty bad. There we go. All right, so bear with me. I'm sorry. I'm tweeting to the people out there. Today on the show, Mondo Weiss and Adam Morrow, 12 to 2 Eastern. That means right now. Let's see how horrible I'm doing at TalkStream Live after that disastrous start to the show. Hey, I'm up in the second row on TalkStream Live. So that means my worst show is better than Geraldo and Mike Huckabee and Ed Schultz. And I've never heard of any of the rest of these people. Mike Gallagher. Hey, Clark Howard. I like Clark Howard. I mean, I wouldn't rather listen to him than me. I wouldn't rather listen to anyone than me. But I do like Clark Howard. He's looking out for you, man. He's a good guy. I almost feel guilty for whooping him over there at TalkStream Live today. But things it could be worse. Anyway. TalkStreamLive.com. Click on my beautiful face at TalkStreamLive.com and help get me up in the higher ranks, and maybe more strangers will click on me and listen to the show. When they go to TalkStream Live to look for something to listen to. That's my thing. All right. So, on my list of things I need to talk about today, Egypt and Israel, those are going to be talked about by my guests and me with them, and so I can mark those off the list. We can wait for that. Ooh, next on the list is Iran. Where's Syria on my list? I forget to write down Syria. See, I forgot to write down Syria, but I think that goes first before Iran. Now, other than the horror, the men, women, and children being blown apart, their society turned upside down, apparently millions of refugees, internal and external, It's a nightmare what's going on over there in Syria. But what's going on in D.C.? Well, it's a nightmare too. But damn it, it's funny. I'm trying to find a way to work that in to state it right. It's unbelievable. It's unreal. It's like a Saturday Night Live skit or something. The debate in Washington, D.C. over the war in Syria. You got the leadership of the Republican Party has nothing to say, and I guess for that matter, the Democrats too, the leaders of the Democratic Party, keep pushing for more intervention in Syria. We've got to save the people, they say, led by John McCain mostly. We've got to save the people. But Carl Levin, the Democrat, and Robert Menendez, they say they agree as well. Arm the rebels, create a no-fly zone. That means war for regime change, period. That means that's it. It's on. That's what a no-fly zone means, just like in Libya 2 years ago. 2.5 years ago now, almost. Anyway. And so, on the other hand, a super majority of the American people, despite all the hype about chemical weapons and innocent children and whatever, which the chemical weapon stuff is pretty much just hype. It may not be 100% debunked, but it certainly isn't proven. Even to, the satisfaction of political insider mucky muck types who have a lot to gain by going along with the state on a story like that, are saying, you know what, I'm sorry, I just don't see the hard evidence of this sarin, as though it makes any difference. Assad, he kills, 70,000, 80,000 civilians. Well, I don't know, half of them fighters, half of them civilians, whatever. But 150 sarin victims, that's the red line? Whatever. Anyway, so the leadership of both parties, the only criticism they have for Barack Obama is hurry up, intervene more. While 70% of the American people, up to their eyeballs in hype about the innocent victims and the nefariousness of the dictatorship there, are 70%, a super majority, opposed to American intervention. Now, I guess they probably don't know, and it's probably not in the poll question. Do you think they should stop the covert support they've been supplying to the rebels all this time? Because that doesn't get in the poll question, because that's classified, even though everybody already knows. Everybody. And this isn't, look, this is, you don't have to go to a single alternative news source for this. You could read this all in the Post and the Times. Or, even the Washington Times. Or, pick your favorite, whatever newspaper confirms your bias. Or you think is the most official, government sanctioned type media. They'll admit to you that the rebels in the Syria war, here and there they'll admit to you, the rebels in the Syria war are really scary, crazy suicide bomber, prisoner beheader, Al-Qaeda wannabes at least. The most effective group of them have declared their loyalty to Ayman al-Zawahiri. Hell, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton put the al-Nusra Front on the banned terrorist list. I think probably only to give them credibility and help them recruit. Well, that was certainly the effect of it. But that's who all this intervention is for. Those who want intervention, what they're saying is, you have to help Al-Qaeda win. Or at least wannabe Al-Qaeda win. These guys who cut the heads off their prisoners, do suicide bombings, car bombings, in marketplaces and out front of schools, and wage, textbook terrorist campaigns against civilians, and who openly talk about at least wanting, I'm not saying they have the power or the ability to really do this, but they talk about wanting to create the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. In other words, this, merge the Sunni areas of Iraq, which America's helped split off from Baghdad and Shiistan to the south, and go ahead and create a new state. The new Saladin to rule them all, or whatever. These are the people that Obama has been fighting for 2 years. That Obama has ordered the CIA to help coordinate the Saudis and the Qataris, the Turks and the Jordanians, to help them, to arm them, to finance them, to create these bogus front groups, political front groups, the Free Syrian Army and the Syrian National Council and whatever, just to spin the public relations. Just to try to pretend that there's somebody that we can work with here among the rebels when there's just not. Again, you can read this all in the Washington Post. You can read David Sanger, who in this case, this is my confirmation bias. David Sanger is the biggest tool, even worse than Michael Gordon. David Sanger is the worst reporter at the New York Times. In fact, I've oftentimes wondered whether he's simply an Israeli spy sent here to lie to your face, to your mom and your dad, to try to make them afraid of Iran's civilian nuclear program. The guy is such a hack. He's just an absolute disgrace, not just to journalism, but to mankind. Shilling the worst sort of war propaganda in the New York Times. But so here's where my confirmation bias kicks in. Even David Sanger admits that the rebellion is the extremists. The rebels are the extremists. There are no moderates in a mujahideen holy war. It's suicide bombers. That's who we're backing there. The suicide bombers. The people who were some of them the exact same people who our government called Al-Qaeda in Iraq, who called themselves Al-Qaeda in Iraq in the last war. Now, going back across the border into Syria. And so the American people are against it. The American people, the ones who've been paying attention, know that the American government has been involved up to their eyeballs this whole time for 2.5 years. Absolutely, since at least the fall of 2011. Phil Giraldi reported 2 new findings on Iran and Syria in December, on December 7th or December 8th, I guess, 2011. Washington's Secret Wars is the article at antiwar.com, where he was breaking the story on those 2 new findings. That's a presidential order for the CIA to break the law. And everybody knows that they're bad guys. And yet, and this is the punchline, I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get to it. And yet, the entire political establishment, while on one hand admitting, not even really trying to cover up the fact of just how horrible the rebels are, they turn around and they wage this entire argument about how we have to intervene to stop the violence. That when we escalate our support for these suicide bomber, prisoner beheader, wannabe Al-Qaeda guys, that's when the violence will stop. And that to refuse to back them more is to betray mankind to the evil depredations of the genocidal Ba'athist regime. Sorry, I guess I need to hone my punchline a little bit there. But you see what I'm getting at, where it's impossible. It's just... Obama says, look, I'm backing Al-Qaeda as much as I can. The Republicans say, you're not backing Al-Qaeda enough. Al-Qaeda says, let's cut the head off this priest with a pocket knife and put it on YouTube. And Obama says, look, I'm backing Al-Qaeda as much as I can. And the American people say, we don't want you to back Al-Qaeda in Syria at all. Even though we don't even know it's Al-Qaeda over there, because TV won't tell us the truth about it half the time. Except for the half that when they do. And Obama says, I'm doing the best I can to back them. And John McCain says, you need to back them more. And somewhere in there, I know, Alan Greenspan's wife gets up on MSNBC and says, well, you know, we're vetting the rebels. We're making sure that only good rebels get all the weapons that we're sending over there and get all the money that we're sending over there. instead of the bad rebels. Even though her buddy John McCain went over there on a whole Let's Vet Rebels campaign and was caught on tape palling around with the Northern Storm Brigade, which that's what they call themselves. They're veterans of the Sunni-based insurgency in Iraq, the people who resisted the American occupation. And the foreigners, the people from Syria who traveled to Iraq just to fight the Americans. Just like in Libya, when Hillary Clinton, Samantha Power, and Susan Rice convinced Barack Obama, over the objections of Secretary Gates, who then went along anyway, of course, to wage a war on behalf of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group. Again, led by a guy named Hasidi. You can look him up in the Telegraph. And, of course, Abdul Hakim al-Belhaj. Both of them veterans of what our government certainly called Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Any foreigner who traveled to Iraq to fight on the side of the insurgency was basically called Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And more or less, that was right. I mean, more or less, the people who went to Iraq, who traveled from places like Libya and Syria and Saudi Arabia to fight against the Americans in that insurgency, went toward the most radical groups, either Zarqawi or his acolytes, people like him. Whereas there was a nationalist insurgency that was predominantly Sunni-based that, did not focus on suicide bombing marketplaces, but focused on fighting the Badr Brigade, a.k.a. the Iraqi army and the American army. Which, I'm not saying that's good, but at least those are legitimate military targets. It's not the same as suicide bombing marketplaces and stuff all day. But so here you go. Obama faces backlash on Syria. We can be happy about this. Some Republicans and Democrats, frankly, the Bachmanites, apparently are against backing the horse. Just like, remember, we talked about on the show last week with Daniel Larison. Among right-wingers, you have people like Daniel Larison, who are decent people, paleo-conservatives, libertarian-leaning types, foreign policy-wise, you could describe them. And then you have Michelle Bachmann, who might as well be in the Ku Klux Klan. She is such a racist, fascist, bigot, conservative. She's disgusting. And yet, because she is so disgusting and because she hates Muslims so much, she's actually willing to look a little bit deeper than just the surface narrative about who's backing who in Syria. And she's right that you'd have to be mad to subscribe to America's policy in Syria right now, to any policy other than stay the hell out of that hornet's nest. Maybe check yourself into the psych ward for some electroshock therapy if you think that this is where the American people must intervene. Yeah, funny that. Meanwhile, mainstream consensus, centrist consensus is, never mind the half of your brain that knows that the rebels means Al-Qaeda suicide bomber prisoner beheaders. And just pay attention to the half of your brain that pretends that, well, yeah, we're vetting the rebels, and whoever the CIA gives guns to will probably end up being a bunch of saints, right? And it'll be fine. Anyway, as Stephen Walt points out on his blog at foreignpolicy.com today, the policy is, well, maybe a couple days ago, the policy is not really to help the rebels win, but just to drag the thing out, to deliberately make the people of Syria suffer while intervening in the name of helping them. Because the longer they drag the thing out, it's cheap to do it the way they're doing it, and it's making Iran and Hezbollah look really bad for supporting Assad against the Sunnis, who of course make up most of the Arab world there. So, anyway, we'll be right back with Phil Weiss talk about Israel policy right after this. John Kerry.
Hey y'all, Scott here. I think you ought to consider subscribing to The Future of Freedom, the journal of the Future Freedom Foundation, in print or online. The Future of Freedom features the best writers in the libertarian movement, the fearless Jacob Hornberger, individualist anarchist Sheldon Richman, and crusading journalist Jim Bovard, along with Anthony Gregory, Wendy McElroy, Tim Kelly, Richard Ebling, and many more. And the July issue features one by your favorite radio host on America's Middle East policy, entitled Stupidity or the Plan. So head on over to fff.org/subscribe and sign up for The Future of Freedom in print or online. That's fff.org/subscribe. And tell them Scott sent you. Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here for the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. Aren't you sick of the neocons and the Israel lobby pretending as though they've earned some kind of monopoly on foreign policy wisdom in Washington, D.C.? These peanut clowns who've never been right about anything? Well, the Council for the National Interest is pushing back, putting America first, and telling the lobby to go take a hike. The empire's bad enough without the neocons making it all about the interests of a foreign state. Help CNI promote peace. Visit their site at councilforthenationalinterest.org and click Donate under About Us at the top of the page. That's councilforthenationalinterest.org. Hey y'all, Scott Horton here for WallStreetWindow.com. Mike Swanson is a successful former hedge fund manager whose site is unique on the web. Subscribers are allowed a window into Mike's very real main account and receive announcements and explanations for all his market moves. The Federal Reserve has been inflating the money supply to finance the bank bailouts and terror war overseas. So Mike's betting on commodities, mining stocks, European markets, and other hedges against our depreciating dollar. Play along on paper or with real money, and then be your own judge of Mike's investment strategies. See what happens at WallStreetWindow.com. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. This here is my radio show. ScottHorton.org is my website where I keep all the interview archives. Whole show archives, too, actually. More than 2,800 interviews now going back to 2003 at ScottHorton.org. Also, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at /ScottHortonShow. Our first guest today is Philip Weiss from the great Mondo Weiss blog. There's a lot of other great writers there. Besides Phil, who you ought to read too, but he's the Mondo one. Welcome back to the show, Phil. How you doing?
Good, Scott. How you doing?
I'm doing really great. Appreciate you joining us again today.
No worries.
So, John Kerry.
Yes.
Yeah, John Kerry. He's the Secretary of State, and he's been over there in Israel saying, hey, guys, let's have some peace talks. And I wonder, best you can tell, how far you think he's getting.
Well, I guess I find it amusing because he's spending a lot of energy on this. It is really remarkable that our Secretary of State has now gone over there, I think 5 times, and really has nothing to show for it. They haven't even sat down with each other, Netanyahu and Abbas. So whatever Abbas's legitimacy, because his electoral mandate ran out quite a while ago, he obviously represents some strong segment of Palestinian opinion, or and in the West Bank anyway. Whatever his legitimacy, he's not even sitting down with Netanyahu. And our Secretary of State is running back and forth to the Middle East to prepare these people for negotiations, to get them even to sit. And now they actually sat down together 3 years ago. Nothing came of that, and so nothing. I think nothing will come of this. Kerry is very positive about it, but he's got religion on it, and there's nothing to show for it. And I find it, frankly, a little humiliating.
Well, I don't understand. What's even the point? I mean, they could just sit around. Obviously, we got to deal with Israel on some level all day, every day. So why not just sit around threatening Iran for another 4 years or whatever? Why even do this? And Obama has done this since, his second day in power? Pretend he's going to do something about Palestine and then not. So he makes the lobby hate him, and he makes everybody who cares about the Palestinians hate him too.
Right. I mean, I think there's been some functional element to Obama's mistakes here, or misdirections, in as much as there has not been an attack on Iran. I mean, that is a good thing. And I don't think Obama wants any sort of military action against Iran. And because of the strength of the lobby, that means, throwing them a lot of bones. So the flip side of that has been doing actually nothing to stop Israeli colonization of the West Bank. So I think that he's sort of sacrificed the Palestinians for the sake of trying to keep the United States out of another military engagement in the Middle East.
That's interesting. People say that this is why Netanyahu is always screaming about Iran. It's just to distract from Palestine.
Oh, yeah, and I wouldn't say it's hard to say that we're not being manipulated here. I mean, we are openly being manipulated in as much as our Secretary of State is running over there 5 times. But I take your point that nothing the United States has said. I was in Cairo when Obama said the settlements must end in 2009, 4 years ago, and all that's happened is that the settlements have continued. And there are always these kind of little symbolic freezes. There's apparently a symbolic freeze going on right now. Well, in spite of that symbolic freeze, we see, hundreds of more settlement units have been approved, and they're moving to scrape another Bedouin village off the map. They're signaling that they're going to move more and more Palestinians out of quote unquote Jewish areas into cities in the occupied territories. It just never ends. The colonization never ends, and some form of ethnic cleansing never ends.
Well, and yeah, one of these new settlements is supposed to, maybe it already has, it's supposed to, in effect, cut off East Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank, where you'd have to go through a checkpoint now. You wouldn't be able to just, or maybe you already had a checkpoint, but now you'd have to go all the way, the extra long way around the settlement to get there. Maybe you can't get there at all. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's a crucial piece of land between East Jerusalem and a large Israeli settlement. All these settlements are illegal, completely illegal under international law. You're not allowed to transfer civilian population into occupied territory. And so there's this crucial piece of land between East Jerusalem, which was supposed to be the Palestinian capital, that Israel has indicated it's going to build settlements on, called E1. It's just another provocation. The United States has said, well, this is not a good idea, but there's never any enforcement. There's never any enforcement. And the New York Times today, which even the New York Times is sick of Kerry's shuttle diplomacy. It says, what is there to show for this? But even the New York Times, it can't ever suggest that there should be consequences for Israel's thumbing its nose at the international community and crushing the Palestinians.
Yeah. And now, I mean, really, it comes down, and everybody in D.C. knows this, right? That the only way to actually make the settlements, to make the Likud party, the government there, put a halt on the settlements, if not, get rid of them, roll them back, would be to threaten their aid. Listen, I said, and I meant it, stop with the settlements. I want to freeze, or you don't get your $3 billion and your F-22s, pal. I mean it. Right? Because without a real threat, what's Netanyahu going to do except just do the football stiff arm and just keep on running?
Look, I mean, as you and I know, I mean, this is just common sense, and it's common sense to anybody that they're just, they've just been getting away from it with this behavior for forever, and there are never any consequences. I mean, even Jake Tapper of CNN had the temerity to say to Jay Carney at the White House earlier this year, there's never any consequences. And I think the good thing about all this process is that it is so ludicrous that it's beginning to become known to the average American. Yeah. They're beginning to have an inkling. And so that holds the possibility, not the prospect, but the possibility that Americans will begin to say, I don't like giving these people money. They're just kind of destroying our reputation across the Middle East, and they're stomping all over Palestinian human rights. So let's cut off the aid. And this campaign that we see, there are various campaigns in the United States, billboard campaigns and such, to end U.S. military aid. And I think that is really going to be a likelihood in the next 5 or 6 years that will become a political initiative. How much traction it gets, against the lobby, we'll have to see. But there've got to be consequences.
Well, I'm convinced, and maybe I'm wrong about this. I like to try to be optimistic, at least today I do. I'm convinced that the American people are so bad on Israel because they don't understand the issue whatsoever, and that if anyone ever really explained to them about the occupation, the permanent occupation of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem since 1967 under basically foreign martial law and the way the people are living there. That it's not just a question of whether the Arabs are allowing Israel to exist and trying to run it all, drown all the Jews in the Mediterranean Sea or whatever, but it's a question of the occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. I think if they knew the truth about that, then they would be on the side of the Palestinians. But what they're led to believe by TV through a bunch of just basically glittering generalities and whatever is that, sort of like, well, the whole world, they just hate us because we're Americans and we're so great, and so we got to use fire to keep them at bay. Apparently the same thing holds true for Israel. They never did anything to anybody, but everybody just hates them, I guess, because they're Jewish or whatever everybody's problem is. And so, the whole world is against them. It's not because what they're doing is wrong. It's because of who they are and who everyone else in the world is. A bunch of barbarians at the gates, I guess, and whatever. And so I think that's what the American people think about Israel, and that if they knew that the reason that the whole world disagrees with you on this is because they know the first thing about it and you don't, and here's the first thing about it, I think that they would change their mind. Because there's just no real rationalization for the permanent occupation of Palestine other than Palestinians aren't human, we can do what we want with them. And nobody's going to go for that. No one can say that out loud like they mean it.
No, I agree, but what we're dealing with are these kind of fundamental discourse questions that, if you go back to the 1930s or 1920s, you find someone, a leading Palestinian intellectual named George Antonius, saying, a very forceful and eloquent advocate for the Palestinian cause, saying, all I need to do is get the facts before the world's court, and everyone will agree that this is an inhuman situation. He was dealing at that time with the Zionist immigration to Palestine, some of it refugees from the Holocaust or the impending Holocaust, a problem that the world and Europe needed to address, no question. But what he was dealing with was the supplanting of an indigenous population by a European population chiefly. And that never got to the world court. And so the Nakba, which in 1948, when 750,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes, or some of them fled, but they certainly weren't allowed to return to their homes, the Nakba was never brought to the attention of the West or people here. And so again and again, there have been these very unequal, unjust conditions for Palestinians brought about by, a form of colonialism, I think a religious form of colonialism. These conditions have never been explained to people in the West, and there's a reason for that, because Zionism is such a sort of part of the American establishment now, or has been, and Zionists get to tell the story. And I guess that's my hope, is that is going to change, partly because of changes in Jewish life, but also because of this mockery of American power that we're seeing in this pathetic shuttle diplomacy.
Yeah. Well, now, there's the thing, too, you have note of it on your blog about Bill Clinton warning, and it's so funny. If we're talking about any other place in the world, this would just sound like it's the KKK talking or something, right?
Oh,
but
yeah.
instead, it's perfectly acceptable for Bill Clinton to say, the Israelis really got to worry about the population bomb. There's just more and more brown people around them all the time. Basically, honestly, in between the lines, reflecting the fact that this basically is a European colonialist white supremacy issue as much as it is a Judaism versus Islam issue or anything like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the explicit quote there was Clinton saying there are too many Palestinians, or, they're just Palestinians are having a lot of babies, too many babies. And can you imagine him saying that in Arkansas when he was an aspiring politician or aspiring to maybe he could get away with it in Arkansas, I don't know, but in some districts. But, or saying that about black people in the United States. He couldn't get away with that anywhere. And he would be run out of, you're just not allowed to make that type of racist argument. Well, it's perfectly acceptable in 2013, especially if your wife aspires to national office, to make that type of statement about Palestinians. And it's racism. And this kind of stuff is just, deep in our national discourse in our media, so that when a liberal Zionist says, there are too many Palestinians, or we're hoping the refugees die out, these are just disturbing, ugly statements that just pass for legitimate liberal discourse.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, and so, I mean, the fact of the matter is that the government of Israel insists on, no matter what, maintaining, obviously, Jewish majority power in the government, no matter what happens, but they're not willing to give up the West Bank. At some point, they'll have colonized enough of it that it really will be undeniably just part of Israel, conquered and taken. And really, the Palestinian population of the West Bank at that point will have to be, at some point, will have to be declared Arab Israelis, just like the other Arab Israelis, right? And then at that point, it's outright a minority-run apartheid dictatorship, and then the clock is ticking on that, because even at that point, whatever president of the United States is going to be in a really bad spot when it's just outright, not close, but outright apartheid like South Africa in the 80s.
I think that, from my perspective, we've already passed that point. What you're describing, of course, is when that perception is fully upon the world's consciousness. And that, as you're right to say, has not yet happened. But what we are looking at now inside the Palestinian solidarity movement is the transformation of this from a movement for Palestinian statehood to one of a movement for equal rights. Just what happened in the Jim Crow South, just what happened in South Africa. You're here, these are integrated populations now. As you observe, there are Israelis all over the West Bank. There are, according to one of Netanyahu's leading coalition members, there are 650,000 Jews east of the old Green Line. And that means that you will never leave the West Bank, this guy says. Okay. And many in the Israeli power structure says we're never leaving the West Bank. And if you've been in the West Bank, you observe these industrial parks and swimming pools and hilltop villages and suburbs of Tel Aviv, as they describe themselves, in Judea and Samaria, not the occupied territories. They're never leaving. So let's have a discussion of how fair it is for someone in a fancy house to have voting rights, while the villager whose land he's taken, who's right next to him, has no right to vote over the government that controls his life. That is worse than apartheid, or is apartheid, and that's what would precipitate a struggle for equal rights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not really in a position to judge, but it does seem like one-state solution is more viable. I mean, of course, I'd prefer a no-state solution. But, it's kind of ironical that, it seems like the Israelis would have to admit that if their government existed just to protect the rights of Israeli citizens and make sure that they have a fair court system to sue each other in, and fair trials for their accused in criminal cases, and prevent invasion by Egypt and whatever, then who cares whether it's a majority Jewish or majority Palestinian vote or whatever, right? As long as...
Exactly. I mean, the Israel lobby and the Jews who support Israel over here, they live as minorities in this country and seem to like it. I like it. It's a good it's a good political constitution. Why shouldn't that work? If that has worked so well for us, why shouldn't we try to support that in Israel? Why shouldn't we want minority, majority, whatever sectarian or religious differences there are? Why shouldn't all people have an equal calling on the government? Government should be the state of its citizens, and that is what is so appalling about, for me as a liberal left American Jew, confronting this place that exists, quote unquote, in my name. I want no part of it when it creates these obnoxious legal distinctions. So I think that awareness is going to develop, and but you brought up the first point you made was there in what you just asked me was about security. What is best for people's security? Well, again, I return to our State Department saying in 1948, you establish the state, there will never be no end of war and bloodshed in this region. And golly, what have we seen? We've seen one war after another. We've seen collateral damage to the United States again and again and again, including the killing of Rachel Corrie in 2003, including the killing of Robert Kennedy in 1968. That was a part of the damage that occurred from the establishment of Israel. And I'm not trying to undo Israel. What I'm trying to do is reform it. It exists. I think that we have to reform it. We have to make it what it says it is, a democracy. And what that does seem to be right now is creating one political entity between the river and the sea in which everyone has equal rights.
Yeah. Well, and, I think you're right that, a certain way of looking at it, the establishment, the recognition of the state of Israel's nothing but trouble, destined to be nothing but trouble this whole time kind of a thing. And sure would have made sense to me to give all the Jewish refugees the best part of Germany. It seems like they'd earned it kind of a thing. But rather than sending them all to Arab lands. But on the other hand, people want peace and people want to get along. It seems to me, and I don't mean politicians, I mean people. It seems to me like there's really a long history of bad decisions made, mean decisions made that didn't have to be at all. And, like take the Nakba, okay? Most people, even like the Saudi peace plan, right, is to go back to 67 lines. And I guess there's a thing about the right of return in there and whatever. But the Arab states, and I don't know if this just counts for the ones in the Americans' pockets, or I think this goes pretty much for the people of the Arab world. They would accept Israel under 67 lines. Even Hamas has said on the Charlie Rose show they would accept Israel under 67 lines, just end the occupation. And so... You know what I mean? It's been a long time since they stole that land from the people who live there, and maybe they can all have the right of return. But I'm just saying, I think there's room for compromise in there if there was any goodwill whatsoever. It's just like if, you can, with foreign policy, you can always take it to the neighborhood level. If somebody moved in the neighborhood, kicked somebody out of their house and took it over, that'd be a horrible thing. But after 3 or 4 years... if he's still just lording it over everyone and beating everybody up and threatening everybody and pointing guns at their head all the time, that's a real problem. He could be having barbecues and inviting people over and trying to make nice, even though he didn't really have the right to steal that house in the first place. He's got to live there for the long term, right? So that's the thing to me. It just seems like it's just like in America. We don't have to be have our government run by the world's worst human beings, but we do. We have them. And they do what they do.
On the neighborhood question, the reason they get to defy their neighbors is because they've got Uncle Sam to take care of them. And if they didn't have Uncle Sam, they would make peace with their neighbors in a second. And if they had a greater sense of respect and equity with their neighbors, they would have grabbed that Arab Peace Initiative back in 2002. I just don't think that peace initiative, which was, a great gesture of acceptance of Israel, that depended on Israel returning to the 67 lines. And it's just not going to happen. So you're dealing with, surprising degree of acceptance that since 1988 from the Palestinians and then the Arab world, and they have not missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity, the Israelis.
Right. Yeah, I forget what it's called now, but MJ Rosenberg did a great article one time a few years back now where he recounts every argument that the peaceniks ever had with the warmongers on Israel policy from, I guess, the 50s or something. And every single time, he just shows, and it's so well done, he just shows how every single time the peaceniks were right and the Hawks were wrong, and look at the trouble they caused with the stupid, horrible decision that they made. And he just goes point for point with 20 examples or something. It's just great.
Yeah, MJ is pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, it's every war and every botched negotiation, every time they could have had to deal with the Syrians and blew it and whatever. And there's a lot of them.
Right. And then you just got to wonder who's in the driver's seat there, and how come there are never any consequences from the United States of extremists being in the driver's seat?
Well, what do you think of the sort of Chomskyite position that it's America that's in the driver's seat and Israel's really just a big military base and we got to keep everything destabilized over there so we can sell planes and whatever.
I guess I don't buy it. I think that if, we're losing a lot of arms sales we could be making to Iran, I don't. $3 billion of sales of military aid to Israel. Yeah, it helps American corporations, but I guess I don't see. I just don't. I believe there's an American interest here, and that interest is not in having sort of endless strife in the Arab world and hatred of the United States from the Arab world. I don't buy the Chomsky position. I think that the State Department, supporting an American imperial interest, said, "Don't start this play, don't establish this state," and Truman bowed to a domestic lobby in that respect. And I think we still bow to a domestic lobby because we think it's just one little part of the world, and okay, they get that, but it's actually affecting us across the world.
Yeah. Well,
and I don't think it's helped oil. I mean, look at would we have greater access to oil for the military-industrial complex if we were not saddled with Israel? I think the answer is yes.
Right. Well, they can't even serve as an actual quote-unquote ally at all. I mean, it's like the louder they proclaim they're our number one bestest friend in the whole world, the more obvious it is that every bit of dirty work our government needs done, we got to do ourselves or hire somebody else to do it for us. We can't hire them to do it for us because it would as though there was any legitimacy to any of these policies, but that would be the worst public relations of all, to actually have the Israelis, say, attack Saddam for us, or, try to prop up Mubarak for us, or whatever. We got to do everything for them, and we got to beg them to please stay out of every conflict that we're in, like in Syria right now, for example. And so what the hell kind of ally best friend is that? They're not even a good satellite. We're a good satellite of theirs, maybe.
Right. No, I agree with you about that. I think that's the the relationship does not serve us. And although I'm against all these wars, those were, presumably launched by, with some idea of an American interest by, the imperial president. And Israel didn't help us much in those imperial wars.
Right. Yeah, of course, I'm against them all, too. I didn't mean to imply that, like, come on, Israel, get to work killing people for us, because that's not my position. I just was pointing out the irony of, what great allies of ours they supposedly are, and they never fight by our guys' side. They can't.
Right, they can't.
Yeah. All right, now... Well, so what's the end of this? I mean, he's already come home, John Kerry. Are they going to keep on with the charade for another few months or for another few years still?
I think it'll go on another few months. I think that even the liberal Zionists are saying 2013 is a make-or-break year. So I sort of feel like after this year and failure, which is inevitable, there's going to be... some degree of reckoning, and that'll be a good thing. And what you're going to find is that more and more people in the mainstream are going to be saying, hey, gosh, it's a modern age. Do we really need a Jewish state? Can't they just, have a state of all its citizens? People in my community have been saying that a long time. You're going to hear more and more voices in the mainstream saying that.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot for your time, Phil. It's always great to talk to you.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure.
I really do appreciate it.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Everybody, that is the great Philip Weiss. MondoWeiss.net is the blog. Read Phil, and he's got a whole stable of great writers over there covering Middle East issues, especially Israel, obviously, but a lot of other Israel issues for you. They're at MondoWeiss.net, and follow him on Twitter, too, at MondoWeiss. Adam Horowitz and a bunch of other great writers there. Later on in the show, Adam Morrow is going to be here to talk about the re-revolution in Cairo. Plus news, Greenwald, Snowden, that kind of thing. NSA. Afghanistan. Tanzania. Oh man, I'm late. Sure hope I can make my flight.
Stand there.
Me? I am standing here.
Come here.
Okay.
Hands up, turn around.
Whoa, easy.
Into the scanner. Ooh, what's this in your pants?
Hey, slow down. It's just my...
Hold it right there. Your wallet has tripped the metal detector. What's this? The Bill of Rights?
That's right. It's just a harmless stainless steel business card-sized copy of the Bill of Rights from SecurityEdition.com. There for exposing the TSA as a bunch of liberty-destroying goons who've never protected anyone from anything. Sir, now give me back my wallet and get out of my way. Got a plane to catch.
Have a nice day.
Play a leading role in the security theater with the Bill of Rights Security Edition from SecurityEdition.com. It's the size of a business card, so it fits right in your wallet, and it's guaranteed to trip the metal detectors wherever the police state goes. That's SecurityEdition.com. And don't forget their great Fourth Amendment socks.
Hey guys, I got his laptop.
Admit it, our public debate has been reduced to reading each other's bumper stickers. Scott Horton here for LibertyStickers.com. I made up most of them, and most of those when I was mad as hell about something. So if you hate war, empire, central banking, cops, Republicans, Democrats, gun grabbers, and status of all stripes, go to LibertyStickers.com, and there's a good chance you'll find just what you need for the back of your truck. Own a bookstore? Sell guns at the show? Get the wholesaler's deal. Buy any 100 stickers and they drop down in price to $1 a piece. You can spread the contempt and make a little money too. That's LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. Hey, you own a business? Maybe we should consider advertising on the show. See if we can make a little bit of money. My email address is scott@scotthorton.org. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. Man, I'm sorry, that is just horrifying, this skipping there. It's like it's 1991, and I'm driving and my CD player is skipping. You kidding me? All right, so I gotta get the Dell laptop back out of the closet, hook that thing back up, and that'll run the commercials and the music from now on again. If I can figure out, I think it'll still work. Because for whatever reason, this computer can't run this program without skipping my audio and making it sound horrible. That's a shame. Also, apparently I really screwed up because it played the wrong Liberty sticker spot. I made up a new Liberty sticker spot. This is it. Hey, Al Scott here, hawking stickers for the back of your truck. They've got some great ones at LibertyStickers.com. Get your son killed, Jeb Bush 2016, FDR, no longer the worst president in American history, the National Security Agency, blackmailing your congressman since 1952, and USA. Sometimes we back Al-Qaeda, sometimes we don't. And there's over 1,000 other great ones on the wars, police, state, elections, the Federal Reserve, and more at LibertyStickers.com. They'll take care of all your custom printing for your band or your business at thebumpersticker.com. LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. There, see? That's my new Liberty sticker spot. What'd you think? Did you like it? Now, my new FFF and my new CNI spots played, right? Yeah, they did. So that's good. Well, for some reason, I got an error there. It didn't play the Liberty sticker spot. I should probably fix that right now. I will fix that right now. It's just a matter of a click here and a click there, and I'm done. Because it's exactly 30 seconds, just like the one before it. So, there. Oh, I better hit save. I didn't hit save. Save for Monday. All right, so. Yeah, I'm Scott. This here's my show. I've got some technical difficulties. But I make up for it by being right about everything. That's pretty good. TalkStreamLive.com. Click on me there. I'm whooping Dennis Miller. I'm neck and neck with Glenn Beck. That rhymes, and you know it rhymes. Admit it, Marge. I actually have that soundbite somewhere, just not queued up. But I admitted that it was plagiarism in the quote by adding Marge at the end. So, it's all right. All right. Let me say one more thing about Syria, because I kind of was hyperbolizing. Not that I was incorrect or anything, but I was just going off on my rant about how insane it is that everybody knows this, but nobody will integrate it into their discussion of the issue on TV. Syrians behead Christians for helping military as CIA ships in arms. Now, look, if you just got back from working on the oil rig and you don't know what the hell is going on around here, you might think that this headline is reading that the CIA is shipping in arms to the Christians to protect them from the Al-Qaeda guys cutting their heads off. Cutting their heads off. But no. Sorry. They're backing the beheaders. I don't know what to tell you, man. I'm sorry, but I don't know. You're the ones who voted for the Democrats, not me. And of course, if you'd voted for the Republicans, if they'd won, it'd be even worse. The Republicans are the ones calling Obama a sissy for not doubling down. He's leading from behind when he ought to be leading Al-Qaeda from the front? Really? Huh. Syrians behead Christians for helping military as CIA ships in arms to the guys with the swords, not the guys with the necks. It's the Washington Times, so I guess take that with your grain of salt. But in this case, it's confirming my bias, and I'm buying it. Well, they linked to the video, I think. A priest and another Christian were beheaded before a cheering crowd. I know what you're saying out there too, conservatives. Well, they were Catholics. I don't like the Pope. You can cut their heads off. Anyway, a priest and another Christian were beheaded before a cheering crowd by Syrian insurgents who say they aided and abetted the enemy, President Bashar Assad's military, foreign media reported. An undated video that made the internet rounds on Wednesday showed two unarmed men with hands tied, surrounded by a cheering crowd of dozens, just moments before their heads were cut off with a small knife. Syria report said. The attackers in the video then lifted the head for show and placed it back on the body. The incident took place in the countryside of Idlib. Syria report said that foreign militants have increased attacks on civilians in recent weeks and that many of these insurgents are supported by the West in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey. Just recently, a Catholic priest was recently executed by radicals, and last month an entire Christian village in Homs was burned to the ground, Syria report said. Moreover, 2 Christian bishops kidnapped in Aleppo at the beginning of the year are still missing. The reported beheading of the 2 Christians comes about the same time, I think they mean at about the same time, that America has started sending arms, directly they mean, to rebel fighters. The Wall Street Journal revealed this week. The Journal reported the CIA just began transporting weapons to Jordan for eventual transfer to Syrian fighters. The weapons transfer is aimed at helping Free Syrian Forces oust Mr. Assad. It's scheduled to coincide with arms shipments from other European and Arab allies for a planned and coordinated rebel attack set for August, the Journal reported. The CIA weapons transfer will take about 3 weeks, involves light arms and possibly anti-tank missiles, the Journal said. And, of course, the LA Times had a piece like that last week, too, that they're training them in anti-tank missiles. Which might blow somebody you care about's plane out of the sky. But anyway, I think you can use those against an airliner, right? Somebody asked John McCain to ask his Al-Qaeda friends how effective they are against airliners. They've had some surface-to-air missiles that they've used against helicopters, or at least I saw footage portraying that on TV. I don't know how true it was. It was a CNN report. And you know what? I lost track of this. I really should have this guy in my
in my bookmarks here. Hell, maybe I do, and I just lost it. Forgot what the guy's name was in here. I got too many of these things. But there was a Guardian report about just an amateur blogger who started keeping track of rebel weapons in Syria. And what kind of guns do they have, and what kind of ammo do they have, and where are they getting it? And he was able to, sort of like the guys that were keeping track of the tail numbers on the CIA torture taxi planes going around landing at airports all the time, flight watcher guys. Is that sort of thing. They're just keeping track of the weapons, where they're getting them and whatever. I should be following that guy because he is really good on what all the rebels have and what all they don't. But now, so this has got to be said, more often probably than it is said on this show. I don't support any dictator in the world. I don't support any government in the world. And I sure as hell am not on the side of some Baathist, commie, fascist, Nazi inheritor of a dictatorship like Bashar al-Assad. I think the first thing he should do immediately right now is shoot himself in the face to death. Screw him. And may whatever religion you believe in bless those he's tortured to death for America and against America. He's a horrible dictator. He's not the most horrible dictator in the world. Well, he's pretty freaking horrible. So, none of my opposition to America's support for the rebels should ever be interpreted as like, yeah, all good people support the Baathists or something like that, because that's not what I'm saying. But I would ask you, why do you think that a majority of the population of Syria, including many Sunni Arabs, outside of the Sunni-based insurgency going on here, are supporting Assad? Why would they support a minority dictatorship? It's not like they're all the billionaire ruling class in on it with the state for the no-bid contract, right? We're talking about a majority of the population of the country supports a brutal police state dictatorship. Why? Because the enemy is worse. Because the enemy is a Saudi-financed Mujahideen, holy warrior, prisoner beheader, marketplace and school suicide bomber brigade of insane maniacs who have pledged their loyalty to Ayman al-Zawahiri, the butcher of New York. That's why they support Assad. Because they don't want their heads cut off. Because that would be a really crappy way to die, don't you think? Some Democrat-financed Al-Qaeda guy cutting your head off with a machete? So that's why they support Assad. Because the opposition is worse. It's the only reason. And I feel bad for, especially among the oppressed, it's a bare majority, I think, but they're an oppressed majority, the Sunni Arabs of Syria. I feel bad for them. Not necessarily for the prisoner, beheader, suicide bomber types, but the ones who are just regular Joes who want to overthrow their police state dictatorship by shooting it until it goes away. They've got the right to do that. If you lived under Bashar al-Assad and you're from any sect, all other things being equal, you might very well want to shoot his government until it wasn't your government anymore too. That's their right. It says so in the Declaration of Independence, you know? It's up to the people of Syria to come up with whatever guards they believe will best protect their safety and happiness. So they got the right to do that. It's just tough for you that you're from Syria, which means you're between every competing power on the planet. And you don't get to have your own destiny. You don't get to have it your way. Sorry. The Americans will decide for you. The Saudis, the Russians, the Iranians, Hezbollah, Qatar, Turkey, USA. They'll decide what happens, what's the fate of your rebellion or not, and what its end is. And not necessarily that they really get to control, but they try, they do their best. And so it just sucks, right? It's like being born between Germany and Russia in the first half of the 20th century. Sorry, dude, you're really screwed. Either that or get on a boat and as fast as you can get the hell out of the Bloodlands, because there's a bad time coming. There ain't nothing Latvia can do to resist. Same kind of thing. It's not that the Americans are going to roll in a full-scale invasion force, although they do have their plans for that, as Barbara Starr reported last December. Military is ready for that. Or was it last August? Anyway, CNN reported that the military had revamped all of their plans. But probably that's not the way this is going to end up, although it could. But anyway, I wonder whether I guess it's too far away, it's too confusing, it's not really going to get traction, right? Unless, if we had a major opinion leader like John McCain was on the other side of this issue, somebody a very high profile like that was accusing Obama of backing the suicide bomber, prisoner beheader types, and saying he shouldn't, then maybe you could get the people to snap out of it, figure out what the hell, who's zooming who here, and what are we doing? But as long as the major Republican Party criticism of the president is that he's not doing enough to help the Al-Qaeda suicide bombers, the vetted moderates, i.e. the Al-Qaeda suicide bombers. Is that I.E. or E.G.? I forget. As long as that's the case, then, and I guess anybody's going to try to stop them, or the American people's, that 70% opposition will harden into a pissed off 70% opposition, you know? I hate to say that, but I think it's true. They need a leader. They need someone who's willing to get in a fight with McCain and Obama both, and who's got the profile high enough to do it. Now, Rand Paul is a senator who everybody expects wants to run for president next time, who already has said to the Senate, on the Senate floor, on the record in the Federal Register, that you guys got to admit that you just voted to back the allies of Al-Qaeda in Syria. It's an irony you cannot escape, he said. Ooh, man. All right, Rand Paul, huh? But then what happened? That was it. Was that the last thing he said about it? Let's have a fight about this, man. What a great opportunity for Rand Paul to make some hardcore, hard-hitting statements on American foreign policy and the madness of those who promote it and support it. And in fact, what better way to establish his credentials than to get John McCain all bright red, pissing and spitting and mad at him for being rational in the face of John McCain's temper tantrum. And obviously all you got to do is shut him up then, or make him doubly angry, as just mentioned the Northern Storm Brigade. And how if you guys can vet the Northern Storm Brigade so well, how come you didn't notice that they're on Time Magazine's website bragging about their role in the Iraq War, fighting against the Americans? You're sitting there posing with the Northern Storm Brigade. And you know what? I believe that it really was thrown into question whether the guy in the picture was the actual kidnapper or not. Now, I don't really know whether he was the actual kidnapper of the Shiite pilgrims from Lebanon last year. But it doesn't matter. It's the same group. It doesn't matter if the guy in the picture was the one that did the kidnapping. That's who John McCain's posing with. The vetted, moderate Northern Storm Brigade. Veterans of the Iraq War. Kidnappers of Shiite pilgrims. Civilians. 9 of whom they're still holding. 9 out of 11 they're still holding for ransom. Because they're criminals and murderers and veterans of the Iraq War where they fought against America. So, but until Rand Paul or somebody else is willing to really get in a fight about this, I'm afraid it's just going to continue on. It's just going to keep getting worse. Although, I do think, as I was mentioning before, I do think that Stephen Waltz is right, that they're really afraid. I'm not saying they know how to avoid this fate or that they're really that much in control of the results of their own intervention. I think they are afraid of the prisoner beheader types really sacking Damascus and what might come later, although probably they figure they can handle whatever it is. If Syria just goes to war and chaos for 15 years, they figure that probably isn't that big of a deal. But for now, they like it on a slow burn. All these crocodile tears about the innocent civilians of Syria mean nothing. What they're really doing is invoking all of that pain in order to deliberately prolong it. In order to make the Syria civil war last longer, even if Assad wins at the end, because it's hurting the hell out of Iran and Hezbollah, who have fallen way out of favor for taking the side of Assad. And as we've covered on the show, it's been a few years now, but at one point, 2-3 years ago, maybe more like 6 years ago now. Boy, how time flies. 7-8 years ago, even. After the results, really the results of the Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon in 2006, Nasrallah became the most popular leader in the Arab world, even though he's the Shiite leader of the Party of God there. And the populations of the Arab world didn't mind so much because he had faced down Israel and forced them to withdraw in humiliating defeat. But now he's blown all that political capital, whatever political capital the Iranians have earned just for maintaining their independence from the American empire, if nothing else, this whole time. You know, any admiration they had in the minds of the people of the Middle East, almost entirely of the Arab world, are evaporated now. Other than in southern Iraq. But everybody else is a Sunni, and it's pissing them off, man. So it's hurting Iran, it's hurting Hezbollah, and if it doesn't defeat the Syrian regime, it's at least hurting the hell out of them too. So from Obama's point of view, go ahead and let it burn on the back burner, not the front one, you know? Makes sense to me. I don't know. I actually only read Walt talking about another guy's article and saying he agreed with it. I didn't bother reading the original because I had a deadline. But anyway, that sounds right to me. That's what we've been talking about on the show for quite some time now, of course, as well. All right, here, I got to do this real quick. All right, so I'm Scott, and got to do a live read here for The Prospector at RockyMountainMiners.com. The Prospector is a computer that is ready to go, basically. Program set up to mine Bitcoins and Litecoins, these new cryptocurrencies. So if you're already one of these guys who knows everything there is to know about them, then the currencies, then go check out RockyMountainMiners.com and see about getting in on the mining of these coins in the first place. They've got their email address, info@RockyMountainMiners.com, and their telephone number there, 855-355-MINE. And if you don't know about the cryptocurrencies, learn about them. And then go to RockyMountainMiners.com. See what you see and see if you like it. If you buy the Prospector and you use the promo code Scott Horton Show, you save $100, which is a pretty good deal. And I understand that it's working, me telling you guys about this. So good. I hope you dig it. I hope to hear some feedback. You know, if anybody's already got a Prospector and they're having good luck or bad with it or anything like that, let me know. I want to know. Honestly, and I think you guys know this, I think I've been upfront about this, I don't really know all about cryptocurrencies, and I sure as hell ain't a computer programmer. But I like John Logan Jones. I think he's a decent guy, and I think he ain't lying. You know? I think he's being completely above board. I think he's got a great thing going on here. It sure looks to be one. But of course, I need more opinions than that. So you guys let me know. How's this working out for you? If I can sell enough of these, maybe I can get one of them. They're just starting out. They can't afford to give me one yet. If I can sell enough of these, maybe I'll get one, and then I'll mine some Bitcoins and Litecoins, and then I'll have some Bitcoins and Litecoins. That sounds cool to me. I don't know what the hell you're waiting for. RockyMountainMiners.com. Use the promo code Scott Horton Show and save $100. And also, they have all the information in the world. If you want to exchange 1,000 words or 5,000 back and forth with John Logan Jones, he will answer you. info@RockyMountainMiners.com. And if you want a souped up, more expensive, customized job, they can certainly work with you on all of that too. So it doesn't have to be exactly what they got here. It's a brand new company. They're willing to work with you. And, man, I just think this is great. I think this is the coolest thing in the world. I'm hoping that the future is competing cryptocurrencies of every description, putting the central bankers of the world completely and totally out of business for all time. I don't know if that's really possible, but that's the future I'm hoping to see anyway. RockyMountainMiners.com. Go and check it out. The Prospector. Save $100 if you tell them Scott Horton Show. Okay? All right. Coming up in a minute, more commercials. And then Adam Morrow from Interpress Service has been living in Cairo. He's going to be on the show to tell us what the hell's going on over there. It's like the Arab Spring all over again. Oh no. Dennis Miller and Mike Huckabee are both beating me on the TalkStream Live rankings now. Why, that's just horrible. Mike Huckabee. TalkStreamLive.com. Check that out. ScottHorton.org. That's where I live. Also, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at /Scott Horton Show. Okay, now, man, I wonder if I could Google it real quick because I don't know what happened to this thing. I had an article here somewhere, but I couldn't find it. See? Damn it. I can't Google Tanzania now because Obama's there and he's giving his talk and all this crap. But the other day I had one about, let's see, military training. Let's see what I can find here. Where was this thing? I can't remember what website it was that I was looking at just the other day about America escalating the training of troops in Tanzania. What in the world? Man, did someone punch Google in the brain and make it stupid or what? I swear they have really did someone hack their computer's brain? Give it autism or something? You guys are missing it. You're missing everything now. The hell? Anyway, I can't find the damn thing. There was an article that I read about America now stepping up training and support for the military of Tanzania. And what for? Do they have some, internal ethnic minorities that need crushing or something like that? I don't even know. Did they bother coming up with an excuse for this? I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I can't find the damn article. But anyway, so this AFRICOM thing, this is, I don't know, I guess invest in malaria vaccines or something, because the U.S. government is going to be sending soldiers to Africa from now on. There's so many people there to kill, and so much stuff to steal. And everybody, they speak languages that Americans can't understand and stuff. And be lucky if you could get 13% of America to care about the people of Africa. Never mind the majority. And Al-Qaeda, man, terrorism.
And, of course, there's not a country in Africa where you can't point to their corrupt regime and find an excuse to bomb them. If that's all you need is an excuse, come on, let's bomb them. Already we got wars, hot ones, cooking in Somalia, Libya, Mali. I guess they say they called off the search for Joseph Kony, but did they ever come home from Uganda? Searching for Joseph Kony. That's funny. It's almost like they just wanted to go to Uganda. Maybe. Yeah. We'll be right back with Adam Moore after this.
So you're a libertarian, and you don't believe the propaganda about government awesomeness you were subjected to in 4th grade. You want real history and economics. Well, learn in your car from professors you can trust with Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. And if you join through the Liberty Classroom link at scotthorton.org, we'll make a donation to support The Scott Horton Show. Liberty Classroom, the history and economics they didn't teach you.
Hey everybody, Scott Horton here. Ever think maybe your group should hire me to give a speech? Well, maybe you should. I've got a few good ones to choose from, including How to End the War on Terror, The Case Against War with Iran, Central Banking and War, Uncle Sam and the Arab Spring, The Ongoing War on Civil Liberties, and of course, Why Everything in the World is Woodrow Wilson's Fault. But I'm happy to talk about just about anything else you've ever heard me cover on the show as well. So check out youtube.com/Scott Horton Show for some examples, and email scott@scotthorton.org for more details.
Hey, Scott Horton here to tell you
there.
about this great new project, Listen and Think Audio at listenandthink.com. They've got 2 new audiobooks read by the deepest voice in libertarianism, the great historian Jeff Riggenbach. Our Last Hope, Rediscovering the Lost Path to Liberty by Michael Maharrey of the 10th Amendment Center is available now. And Beyond Democracy, co-authored by Frank Karsten of the Mises Institute Netherlands and journalist Carl Beckman, will be released this month. And they're only just getting started. So check out listenandthink.com. You may be able to get your first audiobook absolutely free. That's Listen and Think Audio at listenandthink.com.
Hey y'all, Scott here. First of all, thanks to the show's sponsors and donors who make it possible for me to do this. Secondly, I need more sponsors and more donors if the show is to continue. ScottHorton.org/donate has all the links to use PayPal, Give.org, Google Wallet, WePay.com, and even Bitcoins to make a donation in any amount. You can also sign up for monthly donations of small and medium-sized amounts through PayPal and Give.org. Again, that's ScottHorton.org/donate for all the links. To advertise on the site or the show, email me, Scott@ScottHorton.org. And thanks. All right, I'm Scott. Welcome back to the show. ScottHorton.org is the website. And now I'm happy to welcome Adam Morrow back to the show. He's a reporter for Interpress Service. That's ipsnews.net. Living in Cairo, Egypt, where I think we're working on the Guinness World Record for biggest protest ever, dwarfing 2.5 years ago. Am I right about that?
Well, here, of course, the numbers are still are sort of being disputed. You know, it's always very difficult to get an exact fix on how many people are actually turning out to these different rival protests. But from what it looked like yesterday, it definitely looked like unprecedented numbers.
Huge. I mean, if people go, just look at your Yahoo News photos or look in, latest Google images somehow or whatever, latest news photos of Cairo. It's just absolutely incredible, the people in the streets there. So I saw this great quote, too, where the reporter says to a protester, "But you had an election." And he says, "Yes, so they didn't live up to their end of the deal."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up.
All right, so well, give us the long version. Who's who, and what are they so pissed off about?
Okay, well, let's see. You basically have the Morsi, who was elected exactly 1 year ago now, was elected in presidential elections that were widely regarded as having been free and fair. He won by a very, very narrow margin, if you remember that. He narrowly defeated Ahmed Shafiq, who was actually regarded as a Mubarak era official. He was a long-time aviation minister under Mubarak, and he ran against Morsi in last year's presidential elections and lost by a margin of 1 or 2%. It was a very, very tight election 1 year ago, which saw a Muslim Brotherhood candidate, Mohamed Morsi, very narrowly defeat Mubarak era Minister Ahmed Shafiq. Now, that was exactly 1 year ago. We've now hit the 1 year anniversary, the end of Morsi's first year in office, and you're seeing these massive demonstrations coming out against him now, and basically demanding snap presidential elections. They're demanding his ouster within 1 or 2 days, and they're calling for snap presidential elections. The military just issued a formal announcement, a statement about 1 hour ago. I don't know if you saw this, basically saying that they gave all the political actors for a 48-hour deadline, basically to resolve the crisis, or else they would step in with some kind of new political roadmap, some kind of new electoral roadmap that they were going to unveil.
They didn't, by the way, didn't threaten to outright overthrow Morsi, right? But maybe they sort of implied they'd push him to the side and go ahead and start telling him what to do.
Well, this is the way everybody's interpreting it. That if the crisis isn't solved, and you also have, bear in mind, you've got millions on the streets, and you've got an opposition now that's been massively empowered by the numbers that it just saw, by this massive showing of popular support. So it's now going for broke and is demanding snap presidential elections, a new government. There was some talk of a high-placed judicial figure taking over for a 6-month interim period, but now that the military's come out, everybody's interpreting this latest statement as meaning basically that if the crisis isn't ended, and as I was going to say, the opposition is now calling for open-ended strikes. We're talking about millions of people basically shutting down the country, not going to work until he steps down. So the military has given both parties a 48-hour deadline to resolve all of this, or else they are going to step in basically and return Egypt to the year and a half period of interim military rule that we saw in the immediate wake of the January 25th revolution. We're basically going to go back to square one, and we'll be under military rule for a transitional period until fresh presidential elections can be held.
All right, now, so if we go back to how it was then, there was no... Well, as far as I know, is this right, that there was no real big cheese? It was the military council decides, rather than a new de facto actual single dictator?
There was a big cheese. I don't know if you remember the name Field Marshal Hossein Tantawi was the head of what was called the Supreme Military Council, Egypt's Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, which went by the name SCAF. He was in charge of that, and he had a second in command named Semi Anen, and both of those guys were retired. That was one of the first things that Morsi did upon becoming president, was he retired both of those guys. Mm-hmm. So those two head honchos aren't around anymore. And what you do now have is a defense minister whose name is Sisi, and he was appointed by Morsi, and he now is in charge of the military here. So you do have a head honcho. If you're looking for a character, if you're looking for a personality, you do have.
Well, I guess what I was getting at, what I was trying to get at there was, and I guess this was my mistaken impression, was that the military council had taken responsibility, but they were trying to play down. It wasn't like there was a new strongman trying to seize power. They really wanted somebody else to come and take the power. They would rather be in the background rather than, I forget the guy's name that you said there. He didn't want to be the new dictator of Egypt, at least not in name, correct?
The government, the military does have a long-standing reluctance to get involved in politics and getting into state administration and bureaucracy and that sort of stuff.
I mean, they run the state; they just don't like it being called that, right?
Well, it's not equipped to run the domestic political arena. It's simply not equipped to administer the country. It's probably in a substantial state of disrepair after 30 years of Mubarak, sort of letting it go to seed. And as well, that's not its primary mandate traditionally. Traditionally its primary mandate has been to protect the country from foreign invaders, secure the borders, and that sort of thing. And it's loath to really get sucked into this whole political quagmire, especially 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 after the year and a half period of military rule that we saw after the revolution, when you had protesters out on the streets all the time blasting the military council for these human rights violations and for their heavy-handed treatment of demonstrators and this sort of thing. They were constantly accused of being murderers, and you had protesters out on the street all the time calling for their prosecution. So now the military is especially reluctant because they said, we did this before and you guys called us murderers and you demonstrated against us and you called for our prosecution. So they're very, very reluctant to get themselves back in that same situation again. However, they've obviously come to the conclusion that if the situation doesn't improve by itself or between the two primary camps, then they're going to have no choice but to step in. And they've given the presidency sort of 48 hours to solve the problem, which looks very highly unlikely.
Right. Yeah, it certainly does. Well, so now here's the thing. When it comes to what everybody's so angry about, it's basically the economy and a lot of just basic police issues, basic security kind of stuff everybody's so fed up with.
Yep.
But what the hell is the president supposed to be able to do about that? That's not up to him anyway. Was he magic?
Listen, I agree completely. I think it's incredibly realistic and very disingenuous to expect a guy, especially someone who's coming from the persecuted Islamist opposition, to take office and solve all of the country's ills. Basically undo 30 years of corruption and mismanagement within 1 year. I think it's extremely unrealistic expectations. And a lot of pro-Morsi people are saying he was never given a chance. He should get his 4 terms to try to have a chance to clean house. And that this idea that he could solve all the country's security concerns and overturn the deal with all of these economic pressing economic issues overnight is just extremely disingenuous. The idea that someone would be able to do that within a single year. So
well, and now the local police, are they all answerable to the president, or they have local jurisdictions that are supposed to?
This is a great question. Yeah, this is one of the main problems, is that the police have basically refused to take orders from the presidency over the course of the last year. Because if you remember, under Mubarak, the police were detaining the Muslim Brotherhood guys. The police were cracking down and raiding their homes and locking them up and torturing them in many cases. So now, all of a sudden, overnight after the revolution, you find all of a sudden the police are now supposed to take orders from the same guys that they were beating up, just not too long ago. And for that reason, you had this dynamic where the bulk of the police simply refused to deploy, and that's why you haven't had police really on this. You haven't had police presence in the streets in Egypt since the January 25th revolution.
Right, but then he takes all the heat for it.
Sorry?
He takes all the heat for them not showing up to work.
Exactly. And then everybody turns around basically and says, Morsi is incapable of providing security on the streets. Yeah, it's very, like I said, it's very disingenuous in many regards.
Okay, now here's the thing though, is, when we're looking at these protests, we try to categorize people and their politics as best we can, right? You have more or less the liberals and the unionists and stuff, and then you have the hardcore Salafists who think that the Muslim Brotherhood are a bunch of sellouts, right? And then you have the people who are the Brotherhood supporters, and I don't know what other factions you want to describe and or include, but it seems to me, looking at Al Jazeera, it looks like a consensus, even among the people who supported Morsi in the first place, that he ain't magic, but he could have been doing a hell of a lot better than he has been, and that right or not?
Well, listen, the way I see it is he's made some incredibly bad moves, some incredibly stupid moves. I don't know if that's his fault or if it's the Brotherhood's fault. And again, I just reiterate that President Morsi has come from the ranks of the Muslim Brotherhood. They've made some incredible missteps. Very little has been seen in terms of the daily lives of Egyptians have not improved. There's very little, there's very little on the ground that would suggest that life has gotten any better. In fact, some things have gotten worse. There have been these constant electricity cuts. There have been these chronic fuel shortages, benzene shortages that everybody's complaining about. So in that sense, for sure, there are definitely grievances. The opposition has every right to have grievances. But that being said, it's almost, it would be impossible to be able to solve these long-standing problems that Egypt has been suffering for so long. It's impossible to undo this stuff overnight, especially when you also have elements of the deep state, because there are still pro-Mubarak elements deep within these state institutions that are purposely trying to trip up the government, and I think there was a lot of that going on. I think people were purposely supplies of stuff, subsidized bread and the whole electricity. I think they were definitely intentionally tripping that up from inside, just in order to increase public dissatisfaction with the government, and it worked to devastating effect. And not only that, but you also have the private media here, which is mostly owned by very, very wealthy businessmen, all of whom were very closely linked with the Mubarak regime. You have that media. That privately owned media that you have in Egypt is rabidly anti-Islamist. So for a year, if not more, this privately owned media has been spewing out, nothing but smear campaigns against the president. So I think that had a lot to do. I think that also had an incredible effect in terms of mobilizing people. That's the main reason why a lot of probably 90% of the people who came out yesterday to demonstrate have probably been influenced by this non-stop assault by the media on Morsi.
Yeah. Well, now, so when the 48 hours is up, is this the end of regular elections and back to military dictatorship, or what do you think is going to happen?
It's unclear. It's kind of unclear as of yet, what exactly. I mean, because the military didn't state that they would step in, it didn't say definitively that they were going to step in, but that's certainly how it's been interpreted. So it's really uncertain. And also, I'd also like to point out also that you have the opposition is also divided between. You said you were trying to classify the people that came out on Sunday. From my estimation, and definitely people would definitely challenge me on this and argue with me on this, but the liberal left revolutionary element is probably something like 10 or 20% of that mass. And I would go so far as to say that 80 or 90% of the protesters that we saw yesterday were actually pro former regime and would actually like to see somebody like Ahmed Shafiq come back, basically reinstall the former Mubarak regime back in Egypt again.
I see. So then, the end of regular elections, back to military dictatorship. Well. No, help me out with this. Because wasn't Mubarak's faction the military, or what other faction did he represent? Because it wasn't the Islamists, and it wasn't the liberals.
Oh yeah, no, certainly not. His National Democratic Party, which worked in tandem with the military.
Yeah, I mean, I always called him General Mubarak because I always figured, why go along with his pretension, or Hillary, or Condoleezza Rice's pretension that he's a president when he's a dictator. He's a military dictator. Right.
Well, what would really be tragic is if they did call snap presidential elections, and if Ahmed Shafiq has been waiting basically in the Emirates this whole time. He's been abroad. He's been based abroad more or less since the revolution. And my fear is that basically if they do hold snap presidential elections, he's going to be brought back as this, highly touted in the media as this savior, as this hidden savior that's been waiting abroad, waiting for the right time to come back and save Egypt and to bring it back to normalcy after two and a half years of all of this crazy revolution stuff. Because you have to bear in mind, the very idea of revolution now has suffered a huge blow over the last 2 years, because a lot of Egyptians, you have a lot of Egyptians saying like, look, we supported the ouster of Mubarak, but we almost prefer the at least he provided stability. I mean, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Our economic situation hasn't improved, and now we have instability as well. So isn't it better to just go back to a period where at least things were stable? Things might have been difficult economically and all of that, but at least you had a modicum of political stability in which people could work and maybe make a little bit of money. So So now you have this dynamic where if Shafiq were to return to Egypt and run in presidential elections, I suspect he would win them. And remember, he only lost by 49% in last year's election. So my fear is that Egypt might become one of the first countries to basically overthrow a dictator in a popular revolution and then vote the same regime back into power again through the ballot box. That's my biggest fear.
Yeah, boy, wouldn't that be something? Now, so tell me about the American role in all of this. And I know that the CIA is a secret and everything, but of course, as we've talked about for a couple and a half years now, the CIA has long-standing ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, at least back in history. And of course, they backed Hosni Mubarak and they wanted to keep him. But then, of course, they backed the liberals some in the days leading up, or maybe the years leading up to the revolution, because they knew he was going to die at some point, and they'd already figured that his son was a no-good Nick, and that wasn't going to work out. And so they were trying to figure out something. So, and then we've talked before about all of the different pressures on the Egyptian government to just basically leave everything well enough alone when it comes to foreign policy, because they've got enough domestic problems at this point and that kind of thing. But I always wonder, which scale the CIA's putting their thumb on, and obviously that could be 3 or 4 competing interests at the same time that they're weighing in on the side of too.
Sure. Well, I don't dismiss the possibility that they've actually got their hands on both sides. This is an interesting point that you bring up the American issue, because it's an issue that's become extra sensitive in the course of the last couple of days and weeks. And Syria actually is a part of this whole thing. You now have basically rising anti-Americanism in both camps, which is a real bummer for me because I live here. But you actually have mounting anti-Americanism being seen among the opposition camp. Who accused Morsi of taking on pro-U.S. positions in the last couple of months, especially the one regarding Syria. If you remember, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, the president announced that he was severed, that Egypt cut ties with Damascus, basically, which was a pretty big deal. That was a pretty big deal. And a lot of people noticed that the opposition was very quick to point out that decision by Morsi came something like 3 days after the U.S. had basically said that it was going to start arming the rebels in Syria. So a lot of people accused Morsi of basically following an American policy line. And also go ahead, Scott.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, I was also going to say that that because the Brotherhood has also said it would continue to respect Camp David. I don't know if you remember this, but when they were elected, they said they would continue to respect Camp David, and they made several other they took several other positions that were seen to be in line with U.S. interests.
Well, now
which is
it's a very important point here about Egypt throwing in with the revolution in Syria, because, of course, if you were to listen to the Rush Limbaugh clones of America or whatever, they would tell you that this is just another example of our Muslim president, siding with the Muslim Brotherhood and the Muslim Brotherhood plot in Syria, something like that. Actually, Limbaugh probably would be pro-Al-Qaeda in Syria. You have to go a little further to the right. Michelle Bachmann and them, right? They would say this is, the people a little further to the right there would say that this is a matter of Obama carrying out a Muslim Brotherhood agenda, but really it does seem like it's a Muslim Brotherhood carrying out an American agenda here in the real world, just like back in the old days. No, I mean, in fact, obviously I could see why the Muslim Brotherhood would want revolution in Egypt and what they have to gain from it. And I know the Qataris are helping support the Syrian branch. I said Egypt when I meant Syria. I know that the Qataris are helping support the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria and all that. But boy, as far as public relations goes, when everybody knows that America is on the side of the rebellion over there, that was a real brain-dead move of him to do, right? For domestic politics?
You mean for Morsi to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was the first thing he did that really made me question what these guys were thinking.
Well, now, he may have no choice. I mean, he very well may have just a gun to his head that we don't understand exactly.
Well, okay, this is one possibility, that there's stuff going on in the background and he had a gun to his head somehow, and that he was given an instruction, he was given a directive and told, it was made a deal that he couldn't refuse or something like this in the background. This is one possibility. However, there's also another important dynamic on the domestic level here, is that because Morsi has basically fallen out so badly with the liberal and the liberal left, him and the Muslim Brotherhood have basically had to fall back on the Salafist right wing, which constitutes the other roughly quarter. You know, if you look at the results of 2011 parliamentary elections, you'll find Muslim Brotherhood about 50%, liberals and leftists about 25%, and the Salafists about 25%. So basically, because basically relations with the left have collapsed so irreparably over the last couple of months, he's basically had to fall back on and try to get support from the Salafist right. And the Salafists are super anti-Assad. Mm-hmm. And that might have been, along with having been a directive from the United States, it was definitely seen as a sop to the Salafist right wing, who are all, I mean, these are guys that basically want to go to Syria and join the jihad.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. So, all right, now listen, I'm sorry. Adam, I just realized that I kept you way over time. You needed to go early today, and I've kept you.
Yeah, no worries. I do have to move, Scott. I do have to move. But I hope to hear from you again soon. I'm sure there's going to be plenty more crazy stuff that we're going to see here over the course of the next couple of days and weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got your number. Thanks again. I sure appreciate it.
Okay, take care. Talk to you soon.
All right, everybody. That is a great Adam Morrow. He's a reporter for Interpress Service. That's IPSnews.net, reporting from Cairo. And now to end the show, and I'm going to go a little bit over time, not on no agenda because I don't think I can do that, but on my own stream at scotthorton.org anyway, I'm going to go a little bit over time with this as well to make up for the complete disaster at the beginning of the show today, so that I have a good 2 hours to give to Alan for the Liberty Express show. And so this is going to be some Glenn Greenwald in his speech to the Socialism Conference, but I think this part, I've got it queued up to the part where he's talking about meeting Snowden and who Snowden, the leaker, really is. And I think that this is really important for people to understand. And yeah, so here's that. I'm going to save some of the commentary I was going to give and just let you listen. This is the great Glenn Greenwald from The Guardian and the author of Liberty and Justice for Some, giving a speech to the Fourth International or something about Ed Snowden and the NSA leaks and et cetera, et cetera. He also does tease in here the next story coming out. He says they are saving 1 billion cell phone calls a day, the audio. Right? Wasn't I speculating in the last few weeks about are they saving all the audio too? He says yes, 1 billion cell phone calls a day. Cue it up to 40 minutes is where he talks about that. It's called Glenn Greenwald Speaks Out on YouTube if you want to look at it. It's really good. But if you haven't already, anyway, please listen closely to his description of meeting Snowden and how it was that he came to work with Snowden and get these leaks and et cetera, et cetera. It's really worth your time.
I think it's really the predominant theme. It's this idea that there's really no point in talking about political problems and systemic injustices if you're not simultaneously grappling with the question of what is it that I as an individual can do about it. And I just want to spend a little bit of time describing to you what has happened to me over the last 4 weeks from a somewhat personal perspective, because it probably has been the most eye-opening experience for me with regard to this question, this what can I do about these things question. And so I just want to share with you what happened that kind of led me into this story. It was many months ago that I was first contacted by Edward Snowden. He contacted me by email. He was anonymous. I had no idea who he was. He didn't say much. He simply said he had what he thought would be some documents that I'd be interested in looking at, which turned out to be the world's largest understatement of the decade. But he didn't tell me much about himself, and several months went by because we talked about creating an encryption system and other things, and it wasn't really until he was in Hong Kong with the documents that we really began to have substantive conversations about who he was and what he was doing and what kind of documents he had. And I spent many hours with him talking online when he was in Hong Kong, but I didn't know his name. I didn't know anything biographical about him, his age, where even he worked. And he was trying to get me to come to Hong Kong to speak with him. And before I would do that, fly all the way across the world, I wanted some assurance that it was really worthwhile, that there was something, that it was substance behind what he was saying. And so he sent me a little appetizer, sort of like if you have a dog, you kind of put the biscuit in front of the dog's nose to get it to where you want to go. That's what he was doing to lure me to Hong Kong. And these documents, even though there was just a little sampling, were the most extraordinary things I had ever seen. I remember after I read the first 2 pages literally being dizzy dizzy with ecstasy and elation over what it is that he had. And so, like most of us do when we're interacting with somebody exclusively online, I began to form a mental impression of who he was. And I was pretty certain that he was older, even like in his 60s, that he was probably like a senior bureaucrat within one of these national security state agencies, kind of grizzled and nearing the end of his career. And the reason I thought that was because he had such obviously penetrating access to such top secret documents. He also had incredibly sophisticated and well thought through insight into the nature of the national security apparatus and his own relationship to it, that I thought must mean that he had been thinking about these things and interacting with them for decades. But the real reason I thought that he was that age, 60s, nearing retirement, nearing even the end of his life, was because he was very emphatic from the beginning when I first began talking to him that he absolutely knew what he was doing would essentially unravel and probably destroy his life. That the chances that he would end up in prison for the rest of his life, if not worse, were very high, probably close to inevitable. Or that at the very least he would be on the run from the world's most powerful state for the rest of his life. And I didn't really consciously think about it, but I think I tacitly assumed that anybody who was willing to make a sacrifice in their life that extreme was probably somebody who had just endured so much and was near the end of their life anyway, that they had worked up the bravery to do that. And when I got to Hong Kong and I met him for the first time, I was more disoriented and just completely confused than I think I had ever been in my life. Because not only was he not 65, he was 29, but he looked much younger. And so when we went back to his hotel room and began questioning him, when it was Laura Poitras, the filmmaker, and I who went back to his hotel room, what I really wanted to understand more than anything else was what it is that led him to make this extraordinary choice. In part because I didn't want to be part of an event that would destroy somebody's life if they weren't completely open-eyed and rational about the decision that they were making, but also in part because I really wanted to understand, just from my own sense of curiosity, what